Danica, could you say something just so I know you're good?
Hey, is it
Cool.
working?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Everything should be okay. All right, let's get started. Okay, welcome everybody to our VXP Beginner Figma workshop. I'm Daniel, and we have Danica and our assistant, Chell. So for the agenda today, we're going to start with navigating the editor. So getting familiar with how to like zoom around. And then we'll move into the tools, making shapes, kind of text. Then in the middle of the workshop, we'll start with demoing. Finally, we'll finish up with some prototyping. And then we'll answer any of your guys' questions.
Hey, Daniel, the slides aren't showing on the screen.
Oh, they're not showing.
No.
Are they showing now?
There you go. Yeah, got it.
Okay. Well, this is the title page, and this is the agenda. Okay, moving forward. Danica, you want to kick us off with the introduction?
Yeah. Hey, nice to meet everyone. I'm Danica. I currently work as a designer at Applied Digital on their marketing team. I do some of their promotional works and any internal designs. I was a former TA for IED class 235, which was a information design class and some little bit of web dev, web design, as well as the director of design at SQ Esports. Yeah.
Cool. I'm Daniel. I'm currently the director of web development and media at KSIT, and I also do graphic design at UPhoto. And I'll hand it off to Chell.
Hello everyone, my name is Chell and I'm a freelance UX designer. I mainly focus on UX design, UI design, and the principle of game design. So I'm also working on the indie game recently time. That's my interest.
Cool. Now that's us. So what can you expect today? Well, we're going to familiarize ourselves with Figma. So we're going to learn through the basics and kind of bring the ideas that you guys have to life. So what does that mean? We're going to use the tools and create kind of a digital interface. And we'll walk you along the process. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop into the chat. Chell will either respond or bring up the question to the class. Yeah. Also, feel free to speak up if you have a question. But we're also curious as to who you guys are. So if you want to pop into the chat or speak up, we just want to learn a little bit about you, kind of like we can talk about your design experience or what you kind of want to get out of the workshop today. Yeah. I can't see the chat, but yeah, Chell, let me know. Okay. Danica, you want to take over?
Yeah, for sure. So what is so great about Figma in the first place? For one, Figma is a super seamless and real-time collaborative platform. So when we're on the actual canvas, you'll be able to see my cursor along with my teammates moving around, and we can work at the same time on the same project. It's an easy and organized space for your projects, so it's easier to hand off designs between fellow designers instead of saving your final version of an AI file and then emailing it to your teammate. It's all in one place. So this completely streamlines workflow. It allows everything to be saved in one space, and it's always going to be auto-saved, which is an even better advantage to Figma. There are also tons of community plugins you can download, and we'll show you a few that can help you customize your experience and make the work a little easier depending on your needs. We have other design tools like Adobe XD and Sketch, but they're a little more asynchronous, again, with handing off files. But they do have some other prototyping features that might be advantageous to you in comparison. Otherwise, Figma is accessible for beginners. That's why we're teaching you here. And easy to pick up for anyone who's situated with Adobe products like Illustrator. And one other thing is you can access it from your browser, so you don't have to download the tool or the app rather. So yeah, use it anywhere.
Cool. Okay, so what are we using Figma for? So a lot of things you can use Figma for is to build up your digital applications. So you can make a user interface via mobile, tablet, desktop, and you can make it interactive and prototype with it. And these are some of the applications we have made with Figma. So the top is a mobile app designed in Figma. Essentially, it was targeted to solve something in the children's health sector. And we wanted to revolve it around exercise. So it's kind of like a gamified exercise app. And then Danica and Chell will explain theirs.
Oh yeah, the interface you see on the laptop on the bottom right is a platform for high school esports, which pretty much helped out different high schools get together, organize tournaments, and even play matches, just casual play.
So the one on the right called Idiot Sandwich is a small Windows platform game that I created with my team, which is based on Unreal Engine 4, and it features a cooking simulation. So what I did is the UI, the game design, and the whole story.
Cool. All right. Moving forward, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with sketches, but I assume maybe some of you guys aren't, but maybe some of you guys are. But essentially, it's the most preliminary or most primitive stage of the user interface. So this is where you kind of explore and ideate and you kind of like rapid prototype. So you just crank out as many sketches as you can and you can share with your team, trying to get your concepts across. Moving through to wireframing. So on the right-hand side, we have a gray box wireframe for an e-commerce website. So this is kind of the succession to sketches. This adds a little bit more fidelity to it. For this, you can kind of define more of the grid, so the layout and how large everything is going to be. So let's say your images and other content.
All right, we're going to move on to the starter file. So if everyone has already copied a duplicate version of the starter file, just let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we'll provide the link again and help you guys actually copy it into your drafts so you have a version for yourself. Get the link. Yeah, let's see. Should have it here. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Chell. How do you duplicate the source file? If you click on the top of the file where the name is or the title, there's a dropdown that allows you to duplicate the file to your drafts. And it'll open a new version in a new tab. Great. If you need to catch up a little bit, we go a little slower at the start. We'll just go over the tools for now. But the goal of our workshop again is to build a wireframe from a well-known app. So again, any questions, please leave them in the chat. We'll look at them as soon as we can. Just note that we won't be adding that much styling to our app just yet. If you're interested in going in more depth, tomorrow we have our intermediate Figma workshop where you get to learn some components, interactions, and actually building out more of an actual prototype. So the first thing you'll see here as you open a file, you'll most likely start with just a plain gray background and no layers on the side. This is your entire canvas or your editor. A quick thing to learn is a few of our shortcuts is zooming in and out of the canvas. You can do with Control or Command plus or minus. You can hold down Control and use a scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in and out. You can also use your touchpad if you have a laptop, pinch and pull as usual. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's also the magnification at the top right. You just want to change it to fit, or if you need to work in one-to-one, of course, go to 100. But our canvas here is huge, so we'll leave it at a fit for now. We also have shortcuts for panning. So if you wanted to just go straight horizontally or vertically, you can hold down Alt and use your scroll wheel on the mouse to go vertically, or Shift and scroll wheel to horizontally pan. But most likely you'd be using just the zoom. And if you wanted to move the canvas around easily, you can either use the hand tool at the top left, or you can hold down your space bar and drag with your mouse. And you'll see here that we have other contributors to the file. These are your teammates at the top right. If you were to click onto another teammate, it'll jump to their cursor. Otherwise, we'll see two cursors in the same space and as many other contributors in the same area. We'll look at the panels just to get you situated with the actual interface of the tool. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we have a layers, assets, and pages labeled panel. You'll see that the layers are actually these different elements that are on your screen currently. So we have a few locked groups, and the groups are indicated by these dashed lines. If we look into and drop down into one of these groups, you'll see that we have several different vectors or other groups, subgroups within them. These are nested on layers, rather. And the position of the layers relative to the top is where it is on the canvas. So any of these images you see at the very top of the layer list is at the very top of your canvas. Otherwise, pages are these drop down on the right-hand side of the layers panel. And you'll see that we have the tab of the Figma workshop, and you can drop down and see the other pages we're looking at. On the right-hand side, you'll see that we have a design, prototype, and inspect panel. These are panels that switch the modes of viewing, but will most likely or most often stick to design and prototype. The design panel allows you to see all the attributes of your selected object. So if I click on this assets panel here, you'll see that we have some X and Y values of the position on the entire editor, the width and height, and then other things such as the fill, stroke, and other options. The prototype panel otherwise allows you to create links and connections between assets or frames and build your interactive prototype. We'll get to this later, so don't worry about it right now. And the inspect is a quick HTML and CSS code block that's generated by Figma for a selected asset. It's not so useful for us at the moment, so don't worry about this. On the top bar, right next to the Figma logo on the menu, we have other tools such as the move tool, of course, to select items, and also in the dropdown has a scale tool. The next one next to it is the frame or slice tool. We'll be using a lot of frames in our prototype, so we'll get used to this in a bit. The third item is different shapes. We'll have rectangle, lines, ellipse, all your primitive shapes that will build out even more complex shapes later on. There's the pen tool. If any of you are familiar with how to use the pen tool, it's a hard thing to master, but it might be useful if you're into illustration and doing vector illustrations. The text tool with a T allows us to create some text boxes and such. And the hand tool, as mentioned before, allows us to move around the canvas. And the final thing is the comment tool, which will be helpful for your teams when you're doing some prototyping later on. We're going to start with the frame tool. This frame tool is essentially a container for all your images, your shapes, and text components that make up a single screen. Figma has a list of frame presets already, so once you click the tool, it opens up on the design panel on the right-hand side. You can see that they have some common phone screens like the iPhone, some of the Google Pixels or Android screens. They also have desktop resolutions if you need to create a web app. So a typical widescreen with like 1440 pixels and however high you want it to be, as well as presentation presets that help you when you want to build your final presentation, like when you're making your user personas. All right, let's create a frame. We can either use one of the presets here, like the iPhone 11 Pro X, and drag it onto our canvas area in a comfortable area. Or we can create a freehand frame where you just drag the corner of the frame. Or you can change the width and height values so it's something specific. So you see here, I'll just type in 1920 by 1080 for a widescreen frame, and it creates a large frame. In here, again, like a frame also is like a shape where you can add some fills and strokes, but we'll leave it as plain white. You can also create frames around objects, which I'll show you in a second. If we were to have two rectangles on the screen, you can hover over and select both of these objects and hit Control or Command Alt G, and it creates a frame that wraps directly around these objects. Next, we're going to look at the shapes. So let's just see what a regular rectangle looks like. If you select the rectangle tool and click it, it creates a 100 by 100 square. But if you take it and you drag it, you can create a freehand rectangle, for example. If you take the tool and hold down Shift while dragging it, it creates a square. This is great for keeping proportions. So remember that the Shift tool always keeps proportions. Same thing for the ellipse. If you wanted to just create an oval, there's ovals here with the ellipse tool, and dragging it creates a perfect circle. And the line tool works in 45-degree intervals. So when you hit Shift and drag, it creates a 180 or 0-degree one. And as you rotate around, it creates 45-degree angles. But lines, again, can just be freehand, just by dragging. Like I mentioned with the frames, again, each shape has its own fill and stroke. So if you wanted to go a little crazy, you can fill it with hex values if you're familiar with those, or just use the RGB slider to change it. Great. The next thing with shapes is creating a group. So say that I wanted to keep this circle and this square in the same group. Oop, one sec. Right now, they move individually, so I can't keep them together. If you drag and select both of them, or if you shift click to select both, you can hit Control or Command G, which wraps around both of these objects. And now it's a single group. In this case, groups are different from frames. If you create a group, the container wraps solely around the children in the group. So if you see here, I move the square away, the group still tries to encapsulate both of the objects. Whereas a frame, if you were to place these objects inside the frame and remove them from the group, the frame is independent as a measurement from the group. And frames can also clip the content so that they don't escape it. Say this is like your computer screen. You don't want any shapes going outside of the screen because then it won't be seen. You can clip the content. Yeah. It's a bit harder to explain, but if any of you have any questions or want to get into the nitty-gritty of frames and groups, we'll let you know, or just let us know rather. The next thing we're going to look at is text. So if you're using the Figma for browser, you'll need to download a Figma font installer to use any custom or locally downloaded fonts. But if you have them already downloaded and you're using the Figma app, it automatically syncs. If we click on the text tool and either just click on the canvas and start typing, or if we drag a box, we create a larger text box. I'm just going to type some text here. After typing some text, you can change the font right on the right-hand panel. So currently it's Rubik. Maybe you want to change it to something like, let's say Lato. You can type it in the box, or you just scroll through the alphabetical order of your font list. You can change the weight of the type. So currently it's at bold, we can make it a light, and this already establishes a bit of hierarchy. If you change the size of the font, you enforce a little more hierarchy. There's also more finicky typography things such as the line height. If you're familiar with this, it usually gives you a preset or a default value. There's also letter spacing if you want to make it really wide, might not be so readable. And some line height that changes the distance between two objects or two lines of text in a single box. Other options here are the auto width of the text box, which changes the width so it only fits the width and height of the currently written text. The auto height changes it so that the text does not escape the current set width. So it'll automatically keep adding height. Oh, can't type hello. But it will not change the width. And the final one we use to create this text box is a fixed size. So if you want text to be constrained to a specific width and height, you can use this. And it's most commonly used in like an interface just to keep text on a specific object, for example. So if you were putting text on top of this square right here, and you want to put the text over it, it will never escape the edges of this box. Yeah, that's pretty much it for text. Same as the shapes again, we have fills. So change it as you like. If you highlight specific text, you can also change those values independently. Great. The next thing we'll go over is grids. This is a bit more of like an advanced thing to go over, but we'll get you a little more situated once we start doing the wireframe. So you see here we have our iPhone frame. Our first thing we should do when you start a new frame actually is to rename it. And you can do this by right-clicking the frame on the layer panel and hitting rename. And we'll just call it home. Or you can click on the frame and hit Command or Control R to rename. Grids are created on the right-hand panel with the layout grid option. You'll just have to click the plus here, and it creates a default 10 pixel grid. If you want to get more specific, we can use columns, for example. And if you wanted maybe a 12 column grid, you can set that here by hitting the count and changing that to 12. You can change the gutter size, so maybe it's just lines for you to reference off. And you can even add rows on top by hitting the plus and then changing the values there. Again, we'll go into this a little more later. But there's like a basic grid. It automatically calculates the amount of space needed for a 12 row or column grid. Otherwise, you can change it with like top or bottom, but we're sticking with stretch for this grid. All right. Another thing to note is when you have multiple elements that you want to be in these, or that you want to have the same spacing between. So let's say we have a few of these rectangles and squares, and they're not equal distances apart from each other. You can select all of the tools by dragging over them again and hitting the top right of the layer panel, or the design panel rather, and hitting distribute horizontal spacing or tidy up in some cases. But you'll see that when you select all of them, it creates this distance between all of these objects. And Daniel will show there that he has 105 pixels between each object. You can change the value of the distance between them by dragging them, and they snap into place to drag or to be at the same distance from each other, or you can change it to a specific number here. Sorry, how to get the grids option? I'll just show it again here. So if we click on this frame, you'll be able to click on Layout Grid and change the columns and rows. So it's on the right-hand design panel. Oh.
Yeah, make sure you're selecting the frame. And then from frame within design panel, it should be right here.
Okay. Yes, again, if you saw between these objects that there's some snapping, these orange lines will appear between objects. And you'll be able to see that, oh, there's 100 distance between these. And they line to their vertical centers. Same goes if you were to drag it above another object. There will be a line to the vertical centers. These are small things that you'll probably get used to on the interface. So yeah, we'll go along with that later. All right, so we're going to take a short break here and actually get into the next activity, which we'll get all of you to participate in. Daniel, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, going right now. Okay, so yeah, this will be our first exercise. What we made here is some name cards, and we'll just walk you through how we made our own name cards. Some of the basic things we're going to be using will be the shapes, colors, border radius, image, gradients, or color. So you see how within this name card, we have an image, we have a title, and we kind of have a short description. Down here is just a shape. Specifically, it's a rectangle. And then on top of the rectangle, we put some text, VXP to stay on brand. And then on top of this whole name card is just a frame. Yeah, and it's just a white name card with a stroke added to it. I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to set up, and then we'll just jump straight into it. Chell and Danica, let me know if there's any questions. I can't pull up the chat at the moment.
I think the chat is all clear. I'm watching it.
In that case, I'll bring in some background music for us.
Oh, so Mohammed are asking why do we use frame?
Well, frames are basically just a canvas for us to draw on. So like earlier, Danica identified that there's kind of presets. So like iPhones and desktops. So like it creates the canvas for like an iPhone. So when we have that canvas, we can kind of just know like what kind of sizing we need in terms of like layout as well. Just because it's like if you were to write out a document or draw a painting, you kind of want to know like what kind of construction paper or like artboard I am going to use.
And also only frames can have grid. So you can add grid on regular rectangle.
Mhm.
Also, Bruno is asking, should we use any specific frame for the exercise?
For this, you can, no, not really. You can use whatever you like. You don't even need to make like this specific name card. Like if you want to make a vertical name card, have at it. I'm just kind of creating like a very bare bones structure for you guys to play along with. Feel free to get creative with it. Because at the end of the day, we just want you guys to get practice with the tools. But yeah, have fun while you're doing it. Oop, jump aside. Danica, are you able to hear any of the sound?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, cool.
Can you also give me edit access to the file or owner access?
For this file?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.
Can view. I'll just transfer ownership. You are now the owner. Okay, why don't we get started? Okay, back over here. So actually, before we get started, let's get a reference. It's over here. I'm just gonna rip this card, bring it over here. Okay, so the first step to creating this name card is to create your frame. So you kind of want to lay out the canvas you're going to be drawing on. What I'm going to do, what you don't have to do, but you can do, is hit F for frame. You'll notice your cursor creates this intersecting, it's the icon for the frame. It's like a plus sign. From there, I'm just gonna drag for roughly how much I want. I usually just create the general shape of what I want, and then I'll affect the measurements afterwards. If I'm not creating for a specific platform and it's more so like a little module or art piece. And then for this, what I'm going to do is go to width, type in 720. These units are all pixels. And then for height, I'm going to set it to 360. So it's a 1:2 aspect ratio. It's slightly bigger than this, but it should be fine. Okay. From here, we have a couple things in this frame. The first thing I'm going to make is the image. So what you can do is either make a square by hitting R. And then from here, you drag and create how big you want it. But it's kind of like a uniform circle. It's not an oval by any sense. So you see how the measurements here are 175 or 158? I want it to be uniform. So I could set this to 175 and then it's uniform, but it's a little bit large. So what I can do is take the corner and hold Shift and then drag to shrink it. And you can see the measurements underneath it. Another thing you can do is, well, it's the same thing, but like when you create this rectangle, when you hold Shift, it drags it and in one direction. But if you hold Alt, it'll expand it along the middle point where you first selected. Just to demonstrate, notice where the cursor is. I'm holding Shift with Alt, and it's expanding along the center of my object. Cool. That is a square, but we want a circle. How do we create a circle? This is kind of like not the most immediate way to make the thing, but what you can do is just affect the radius, and then it'll turn into a circle. What I did here is just drag and then increase until it formed a circle. Or you can hit O, and then you can create a circle as well. So you can make it uniform, hold Shift. Cool. We have a circle. So this will kind of be where I'm filling it with an image. But we'll get back to that. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Awesome. specific measurements, if you're following along, well, it's 174 by 174. And then we'll make our next aspect or design element. Here we have a title, which is my name, and then a little subheading or paragraph. And my paragraph is what I want to learn Figma for is to design an artisanal keyboard website. Cool. So I'll make 2 blocks of text. The first one will be my name. The next one will be some paragraph. I'm just going to write the same thing I wrote earlier. What I want to learn. Oh, it's escaping. So reasons for that is our frame is set to clip content. So what that means is anything within the frame that exceeds the frame's dimensions will just clip. In that sense, it won't show on our canvas. What you want to do is just drag it to show or be within the limits of your frame. Though this text is really large and our paragraph is not necessarily this large. So 2 things I'm going to do. One is I can do Control B and set it to regular. That decreases the weight of it, but I think I want it to be set to light. Another thing you can do is just go to the drop down, make sure you're in the design panel, and I set it to light. So the font weight's fine, but it's really large. So I'm going to just shrink it a little bit. I'm going to set it to 24 pixels. And cool.
Daniel?
Yes.
Muhammad has a question. So would it be bad if I made a rectangle for the background instead of a frame? Like it just for having the best practice since it gives grades and distance detail?
Yeah, it's better to create a frame, but if you, let's say if you create a rectangle, just bonus, you create a rectangle, you can create anything and turn it into a frame like Danica showed earlier when she created 2 circles, selected both circles and turned it into a frame. So let's say you created just a rectangle, for example. You can also go to frame selection and it'll convert it into a frame. But whenever you create any kind of shape, it'll have a default color. In this case, it's C4, 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 which is the hex value for this gray color. I recommend starting with a frame though, because ultimately you want to have the tools that frames provide you. Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, I'm gonna finish this paragraph off. Figma for design and okay. Also notice that like everything kind of snaps relatively to each other. This is just really great for organization. Yeah. Another thing I can do here is turn this into a group because they'll always be next to each other. Yeah, and I'll align it with my circle here. Cool. Okay, I have a couple more things to do here. I have a shape here, which is a rectangle. I'm going to create another shape. So let's make this rectangle here. And then on top of the rectangle, I have some text. So here I have VXP. Drag it into place. I feel like the font weight is a little bit too light. I'm going to set it to bold. Maybe a little bit more bold. We have extra bold. Cool. And I think maybe Rubik for this too. Cool. Maybe set it to bold. Cool. Oh, maybe all of this is not Rubik and it's all Lotto because that's what I had earlier. So if you want to change your font, select your text and go to your text drop down, or you can type it in. I have it as Rubik, so we'll set it to Rubik. Awesome. I'm just going to make this shape a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to drag and center. Cool. Looks pretty good. Move it up a little bit. Nice. All right, for the shape, I want a different color. So 2 things you can do. If you have a reference color, for example, like here, you can hit fill, hit the eyedropper tool and select whatever color you want to pick at. So here I have this color. This hex value is 5B51C6 if anyone wants it, or you can just pick whichever purple you want or any color. Control Z to undo. And then this fill for the text is white. Awesome, it's getting there. I think now is a good time to add the image. So right now it's filled with C4, C4, C4. You want to change this into an image. So once I select image, it primes the shape to have an image placed on it. What you can do is hit choose image and browse for an image on your computer. Awesome. And then
Daniel?
Yeah.
There's someone asking, can the sidebar maximize? Because it's too hard to see them.
This sidebar?
Yeah, where
I can drag it
where's
in.
all the options are situated. Maybe you
Oh,
can
this
try
right-hand
to
side?
zoom your browser.
Yeah, I'll give that a try. How's this?
It's better.
All right. Sorry about that. I didn't realize it was small. I guess like I can like move my seat forward, but you guys can't really move your seat forward. Thanks. I'm gonna select both of this and move this to the right-hand side. You could also group this because it'll be stuck together. Select all by dragging and selecting, Control G, or you can right click and go to group. Group is now available here, or well, I guess it is group selection here. And once you've grouped it, you can also ungroup it if you want. Cool. And then let's add a stroke to our frame. You don't have to, but because we, cool. To add a stroke, click on the frame and then hit the plus where stroke is. This will be the unit of how much stroke there is. So right now it's 1 pixel and it's set to inside. Notice how there's a blue outline here. It's set to inside of the frame. If I set it to outside, notice where the blue outline is. It's outside of the blue outline. So yeah, and then I'm just gonna increase this to 3. Awesome. And then Danica made one too. I think hers is better than mine because there's a corgi.
No.
And yeah. And she named her frame. Oh my God,
Yes.
back here.
Very important.
Daniel. So you can just double click on the frame and name it. That's how I usually do it. But I think Danica usually goes to the left-hand side and right clicks to rename. Or she just
Hit Control R.
Control
Yeah.
R. Okay. Yeah, you could Control R or double click or go to the left-hand side and right click and rename. But yeah, it's good to name your frames because like once everything's like group 76, 75, 3,992, or it just gets a little bit confusing and you kind of don't know what anything is. But yeah, hope you guys could follow along. If there's any questions, please leave it in the chat. And we'll be sending you all the slides afterwards as well. But yeah, we're gonna continue on.
There's someone asking how to turn on the dark mode for Figma.
This is not Figma's dark mode. This is, if you want to download it, it's called Dark Reader. I have it on as a Chrome extension. Yeah, so I can set it off and it should, well, I think I have to reload. Let's see. Reload. Yeah. It's called Dark Reader.
Could we quickly go over how to convert the ellipse into an image again?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just gonna create an ellipse right here. Huge. It's, okay. After you create your ellipse or any object per se, let's say it's a rectangle, you notice how when I click on it in the design panel, there's the fill. When you click on the fill, it's basically what's the color here, which is the gray C4, C4, C4. once you click it, it expands a window, and then you kind of can change any colors. But right now it's set to solid. So what that means is just a solid block of color. But if you click the drop down, you can do other things. At the very bottom, it's image. When you click image, it primes that shape. And then from there, choose image. And then you just look for an image on your computer. I'll fill this one with another image. There'll just be a lot of me's everywhere.
Yeah, same works for frames too. So if you were to create a frame and you have some kind of image on hand, you can drag it directly into the Figma app so that you can see it there. My computer's too slow to do that, but Daniel,
Yeah,
if you want to drag your...
You can drag and drop stuff. Let me bring up the files, go to pictures, drag and drop.
And if you put it in the frame, it even has cropping. So if you have it set to click content on the right-hand side of the frame, or on the right-hand side of the design panel, then you can change it so it fits directly in there. Perfect.
There's like so many of me.
Oh yes, it's an army.
What's after? Quintuplets is 4, right?
Yes.
What's 5?
Wait. Okay, we can't do math. This is a Figma session.
I mean, like from League of Legends, 5 is
pentuplets. Or
pentuplets.
Or quintuplets.
Oh.
Quintuplets and then sextuplets.
No League of Legends in this chat.
Oh no.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
delete. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Back to the slides.
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
So one thing we're going to talk about before we get into the wireframing is the plugins. And there are community plugins available on Figma that you can install directly onto your Figma files. So they work across any project that you work on. And you can access it by the link that we provide there, or you can go into the Figma homepage at the top left of your Figma app, or just on back to files there. And the community tab, which has the beta tag next to it, you can start searching for different plugins that might help you. So something about like organizing or measuring could help. Or if you want to find a library of pre-made icons, you can search icon. And it comes up with tons of different files for you to duplicate, or plugins that you can install directly. You go to the plugins tab. Yeah, there's just quick installs, one easy button, and when you go back onto your Figma file and hit right click on the canvas, there is a plugins menu. Super easy. Great. Yes, there's the feather icons file or plugin that Daniel's using. It's just you click an icon and it gets placed onto the canvas automatically. Oh, very dangerous. Thank you. If you want to go back to the slides, Daniel, we have the actual demo to go through. So we're going to build a wireframe off of the YouTube Music app. As you see here, we have 3 different screens, but we're going to focus on the home screen, which has the albums and different playlists. If we come back onto the canvas, I've provided already a set of the wireframes and the home screen or references of the playlist screen and the individual song screens, so you can look at it all the time as you're designing. So the purpose, again, of the gray box wireframe is to start creating proportions that will help you build out a high fidelity interface as you build out the prototype as well. But these wireframes are great for testing as well, to make sure that your users are able to understand what certain call to actions do, or how different elements are separated on the canvas. So if we look here, the way we've broken down this interface is that we've seen common shapes. If you look at these primary shapes on a typical screen, you'll see these are just squares, and the squares of the album covers with the titles and the artist names make up a rectangle, and these become a single molecule. These also become an organism together as you combine more than one card into a single row. So these common patterns will be seen across different apps, and it'll help you to understand how we interpret different interfaces. But our goal here is not to really create a direct copy of the interface. We don't have to do too much pixel perfection, but we want to observe how we can implement this into our own interface later on. So again, let's start with creating a frame. I'm going to click the frame tool, and on the presets, I will select the iPhone 11 Pro X because our screenshots were taken on that same phone. And it creates a white frame with 375 and 812 as our dimensions. If you, again, rename your file, or your frame rather, to home, saves you some time and grief later on when you're trying to locate different screens and you have a million of them on the same canvas. We're going to try to recreate this grid. If you go back onto the slides, Daniel, we have the example of the grid. The typical screen size for this iPhone 11 model has space allocated at the top for the status bar. We're going to take it into consideration for this prototype because when you do view it, you'll see that the camera kind of cuts it off at the top. So it is a 44 pixel height, and we're going to copy that. As well as the bottom of the screen has space for the microphone, I believe, and that's a 22 pixel height. Otherwise, we have side margins on the left and right hand side of the screen that are 16 pixels. If we come back onto the canvas, we'll try to do this in the most efficient way. You don't necessarily have to use these same proportions. If you are able to like eyeball it and at least get some of the left-hand values to the 16 pixel margin, it'll be fine. What we're going to do is start by creating a new layout grid. And we're going to change the grid settings to columns to start off. We're going to do the side margins first. The way I want to do this is set the count of columns to 1. So it creates this one big thing. And we're going to change the gutter to 0. So you won't see any lines yet, but what we're doing is creating the margins again. So make sure you have the same settings here and click margin and change this value to 16 pixels. And you'll see already here that it's created these red lines on either side that are both 16 pixels width. I'm just going to lower the opacity so it's not as distracting when we're designing. And the next thing we're going to do is create the top navigation bar. Again, pretty finicky with this stuff. You can also just create a rectangle. I'll show you in a bit. But this is just a nice way that won't interfere with your interface and is going to be used across other screens. Let's change the count again to 1. We're going to change the type to top. Change the gutter to 0. And the the height rather is going to be 44 as we specified before. This will be likewise for the bottom nav, where the rows are going to be count 1, gutter 0, set it to the bottom, and the height of 22. So we got our basic grid set up. The alternate version is instead of using grids, a little more difficult to manage unless you just lock the layers. You can drag a rectangle in your frame and make sure that you set the height to whatever margin size you need. So I'll leave this at 44. Oh, yes.
There's someone asking, what's a gutter usage?
In implementation? Oh, yes. typically used to separate content. So you're right with your answer. It's like the distance between your columns. But if you were to have, let's say, a gutter, let's make this like a 6 column with a 10 pixel gutter, and you want your elements in here to be separated by 10 pixels, you'll create assets within each of these columns and just make sure that there is that 10 pixel difference. Oh, and there was not. Oh, okay, because the size wasn't right. But there you go. It's more of like a visual way for you to separate content. And then later on, yeah, just better practice. But we're just going to stick to the side margins for now and kind of freehand it. So gutter 0 and count 1 here. Great. So what we also have provided are the assets that we're going to use for this wireframe at the top. Again, Lato is available as a Google font, so it's easy for you to not download, but rather just change your font to this. And some pre-made assets that you can actually click into. It might take a few clicks, but you can just copy these onto your wireframe if that helps you. And a bottom navigation bar, we're going to build this out from scratch, but if you don't want to do that, then you can use this. All right. Daniel, do you want to get started, or should I get started with the card?
Why don't you build out one of the molecules for the section?
Great. Okay, can do. So again, you see here we have the cards. Each of them are an album cover, as well as the album title and some of the artists that are contributing to the album. What we want to do is just take either the pre-made asset, which is 153 by 153 pixels, or just create our own here. And we're going to put it roughly on the canvas. And 153. There we go. I'm just estimating for now, so no worries about getting specifically perfect. But this is our first element. You can even rename it so that, again, later on, you can keep track of what your elements are. And they're not just vector 1 or rectangle 300.
A student is asking, I still can't get how these margins were added on the sides of the frame. Like, where can we exit the option?
Oh, yeah. Daniel, can you demonstrate on their screen?
Yeah, for sure. So let me just duplicate. Actually, no, I have to make a new one. I make a frame, and then we have the 11 Pro right here. On the frame, I'm going to add a layout grid. From the layout grid, I'm going to click these top 9 squares, go to columns. So we right now have a 5-column grid. I'm going to set it to 1. And then from here, I'm going to set, that's good?
Yeah.
Okay. Should I keep going?
Yeah. The margins should be set to 16, and then the gutter is 0.
Yeah. Vice versa, if you want to create the top ones, you would just create another grid. For the top, you want to do rows. And then from here, we're going to do top. Set this, I believe it's 44. Count for the amount of rows we have is 1. And then set gutter to 0. And then it'll be a similar process for the bottom one. So I'm going to create another one. From here, I'm going to select rows again, set count to 1, set it to bottom. I believe it was 22, and then we'll set gutter to 0. And then you'll have the initial layout.
These are more of like a menial process, so you actually do have to input values. But some presets that are available on the community tab give you some frames that have some preset margins. So it's up to you if you want to use those or create yours from scratch. And again, you can implement those columns, so you can add more, 6 of them, and add a gutter to them. Are you guys going to provide common terminologies that you use? Yes. We'll try to include them in these slides because we go pretty quickly, and yeah, we'll give you a bit of a better review. Can these margins be made hidden if we need to? Yep. If you click on your frame again, you'll see that there's these eye icons. You just flip them on and off. Voila. Okay. So again, going back to the card, we have the single album cover here, and we want to add the card title and card subtitle. So I'll take my text tool, just click underneath here, and I'm going to type card title. It's a bit small right now, so let's change the font size to 18, maybe too large. Let's do 16, and change this to bold type weight rather, and we'll change the distance to maybe 6 between here. We can kind of see the distance between these cards by holding down Alt as well and looking between the card title and the actual album cover. Oh, Daniel, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I'm holding down Alt, but it's not appearing for some reason.
Click on the card title and then hold down Alt and then drag, or just hover over the other objects.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah, and
cool.
You'll see there's a number that appears, and it's 6. So next we're going to create the card subtitle, which is, in this real case, the artists that are part of the playlist. I'm going to reduce the font size here so it's a little lower in hierarchy, and change the font weight to regular weight, and change this to card subtitle. It's a little too close for my liking right now, so I'm going to just bump this down a little. And essentially, that's it. That is one single card. What we're going to do, though, again, good practice, is to select all of these elements, hit Control or Command, Alt-G, and create your frame. And we're going to name this album. So this is your one single card.
Cool. So some of the terminology we're using is kind of from molecular design. It's looking at things in terms of components, and then just building blocks to each other. Just looking at the application here, we kind of have the image, a title, and the artist. So individually, these are pretty much the same thing, just subbed out with different content. So what we can do here is, Danica has created it as a frame already. So she grouped everything together. From there, we can duplicate this. So how do we do that? If you hold Alt and then drag it, you can pull another instance of it out to duplicate. You can also hit Control D after selecting. It'll duplicate it on top of your current layer. And then you just want to drag it out. If you hold Shift, it'll make sure it drags in like a uniform direction, either horizontally or vertically. Yeah, just some guidance. And then if you hit Control D again, Figma already knows how much distance your first instance was when you duplicated it. So if you hit Control D again, it'll duplicate it with the same amount of distance you initially set. Cool. We have a list of songs now, or albums. From here, we notice that here we have a title and a subtitle. This is title because it's higher than the hierarchy. It's heavier font weight. Also, it's larger. So let's create that. Let's create a title. Title. And then I'm going to create a subtitle. Subtitle. Cool. Though this is not heavy enough, so let's increase the font weight. We'll set it to bold. I clicked on the text and hit Control B to set it to bold, or you can go and select it. Cool. From From here, I'm gonna increase the font size. I'm gonna set it to 48. I'm gonna move this up a little bit. And this should be slightly bigger. Let's set it to, ooh, 24 is actually a little too big. Set it to 18. Nice. All right, I'm just gonna move this up a little bit. Also 48 seems a little bit big for this. Let's set it to 36. I'm just gonna type it in this time. Looks about good. All right, I can also group this because they'll be stuck together. Though actually I might not group it in this instance because staying focused may be teetering to be for every single kind of album that's here. So there's symphonic study down here as well. But on that tangent, let's bring down another title. But then we also have these cards. So what we can do is turn this into another grouping. So we can take this section and duplicate it because these sections are just larger components than the more primitive or like the more bare bones ones that we created inside. So let's select all this with the title, hit Control G, and create a group. I'm gonna hit Alt and drag another instance down, and it'll be 34 pixels relative to my first section. Nice. Now I have two sections. From here, we notice there's a couple more items up here. We kind of blocked out the top section, the 44 pixels, because this is not well related to the app. These are just a section that all phones generally have. For example, like your network, your Wi-Fi, and your battery life. It's not part of the app, so we don't really need to design it. So yeah, for that, we block it out. So let's move down here. This is the top app bar, and we have a title. Well, it's more so the logo. And then we have 3 call to actions. So basically 3 things the user can interact with, either streaming it, searching, or going to their profile. First off, let's create our title. I'm going to call this, well, I gave pretty generic titles this time, but I kind of want to make this my app. So I'm going to call it Daniel Music. Actually, I always make it Daniel Music. Let's make it Danica Music. So this is Danica's app. Cool. Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit large, but this is kind of like the logo. So let's make it a little bit smaller actually, because relative to our reference image, it is smaller than our main titles. So I'm gonna set it to 24 pixels. Now I want to create 3 call to actions. So I'm gonna create 3 squares. I made one for 22 by 22 pixels. Another thing you can do is lock them. What locking them does is maintain the aspect ratio you set. So if I have this kind of like 22 by 27, and I have this locked, if I expand this, where is it not locked? Or not? This should constrain proportions. Right, okay, so once you constrain proportions, it will lock the aspect ratio. So whenever you increment any of these measurements, let's say it's like 500, it'll maintain that aspect ratio. So basically this is a rectangle and this is a square, and I'll always make sure this will stay kind of like that rectangle. Moving on, we have 3 of those call to actions. So I'm going to separate them. 8 pixels looks all right. And then I'm going to just lock it to the right-hand side. So this is where like the grid comes in handy. You kind of know like where your app is going to be, and you kind of don't want to move outside of this zone. Awesome. Moving on, we have the top navigation. So I just want to block this area out. Let's create a rectangle, but I think some of this stuff is too close to the top. So I'm just going to drag select everything and just shift it down a little bit. All right, awesome. And then I'm going to create a section for my filters. Because looking back at the reference, we have these filters that will select for focus playlist, relaxed playlist, or a commuting playlist. Notice here, this is more of like a background or like to signify that this is a section. What I can do here is kind of like make this a bit fainter. You can either use your color picker and make it fainter by moving it up, or lighter is a better term. Another thing you can do is go to opacity and just lower the opacity. For example, if I set it to 60%, it appears more faint because there is a little bit more translucency to it as opposed to 100% being completely opaque. Within this section, we have our actual filters. So I'm just going to drag and create my filters. This is going to be 81 by 26 pixels. I'm going to create another instance of it, probably 8 pixels apart. I created one instance, so as long as because I didn't duplicate, it doesn't work there. But if I duplicate, drag it out, and duplicate again, it'll maintain that distance. Okay. Now I'm going to hand it off to Danica to go through the bottom section.
Yeah. There's one thing I'll just make a change for, and it's making this section into a frame as well, because in the prototyping, we'll be needing this to be a frame. We're gonna put the albums, all 3 of them, into a frame first, and just call this album list. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Album list. And the entire section will be changed into a frame as well and called album list again. We'll call this album scroll actually, the child one here. This is album list and album scroll. And I'm just going to copy that there. Great. For the bottom navigation, again, we have this 22 pixels of buffer so that we don't interfere with the mic on the prototype. And we're going to drag from the bottom left of our frame with the frame tool to create a nav bar that's about, let's say, 72 pixels, or sorry, let me just see. 72 pixels high, let's say. And you'll see that it creates like this empty frame around here without any fill. We want it to be seen and separated from the rest of the body content. So let's add a white fill here, and it starts covering the rest. And also add a stroke. So when I deselect, you see that it has this black stroke on the edge. We won't necessarily use this for styling, but it'll just at least separate the content for now. Next thing we're going to do is create these buttons. So we have the home, explore, and library, and they're both paired by an icon and an icon title. So we're going to take, again, the square tool, just create something arbitrary here, a 20 pixel square, and underneath it, click for the text tool. Oh, this is way too big, but I will change this in a second. Just clicking on the text tool box and changing it to something like 10 pixels so it fits down here. I'm also going to make the font weight a bit lighter so that it doesn't take up too much presence on the screen. And you can see here that we have one button. In the case that you're going to use the plugins like the material design icons, you'd be able to put an icon here and pair it with the title and name it again something meaningful. I'm going to make sure that these are vertically centered. Another way to do this is clicking on the top right and hitting align horizontal and vertical horizontal centers, and it should snap into position. Again, select both of these items and create a frame out of them. And we're going to call this button. And again, the parent frame up here is going to be called nav bar. We just want to duplicate the button because we have 3 of the same with the same proportions. just Alt and drag while holding down Shift so that it stays on the same line. Or you can hit Control D and just have them spaced out like this. They're not too far from the side and not too close to each other either. So this one's in the middle of the frame. I'll probably make the distance something like 70 pixels between them, let's say. All right, let's just nudge it over. And if you select both of these again, and you go to the right top side and type in 70 on these two lines that appear next to each other, then it snaps together. So if you're selecting both, yep, you'll see there's the number. You can just type in manually. And there we have our first nav bar. If we want to, we can also create the currently playing song, but for now we'll leave it out. And we'll actually go on to prototyping.
Cool. On to prototyping. So one of the most common things you do within prototyping is linking your different screens together. For now, we only have one screen. So let's just create another instance of this screen by making a duplicate. Like with duplicating squares and other things, just hold Alt and drag. I'm going to rename this to Home 2, just to differentiate them. And then I'm going to set the background color of this frame to be different from our initial one. So by clicking on the frame, I'm going to go to Fill. I'm going to set this to something a little bit darker. Yeah, maybe like that. And while I'm at it, maybe change the text colors. There we go. All right. So for prototyping, we now have our two frames, and we just want to link them. So this is part of the prototyping tab, as opposed to the initial design tab. From here, when you click prototype and you select one of your frames, you'll notice that it kind of outlines your frame with this kind of node sticking out at the right-hand side. This node is something you can drag and select to like connect to another screen. So if I just click on the screen, they should navigate to each other. But generally, you want to click on a specific item. For this case, in YouTube Music, let's say we click on the album and it sends us to another screen. So to do that, just select until you get to the album you desire. And then you'll see the node attached to it. And then dragging and moving it to the next screen. You'll see a pop-up module here. It says on tap. So what this means is when you click it, or like on a phone, on taps is just tapping the actual icon. What will happen is it'll navigate to, and this will be whatever it'll navigate to. Home 2 is what I named my second frame to. So if I click on this album, it'll send me to this page. Okay. So the beginning of the prototype, it'll show the play button here. So flow 1, or you can hit at the top right, you can click present and it'll go into prototyping. I'm just gonna click the play here. It'll create another window. And then now if I click on this album, it'll send me to my Home 2 screen. Another thing I should mention is the actual screens or like the phone you'll have. So within prototype, you can go to iPhone 11 Pro and set it to whichever color you want. So right now it's set to gold. Let's say I wanted to have space gray. So when you prototype, it'll show the actual phone as opposed to just the rectangle screen. But yeah, that's the basics of prototyping. Your apps can get really large. So for example, in our intermediate workshop, we'll be looking at multiple screens and we'll try to link all of them together, simulating kind of what YouTube Music would be like if you were to interact with it. And this kind of communicates to a lot of your stakeholders how you want your app to function, being like, let's say a developer on your team, you want to let them know, oh, how does this respond when I interact with it this way? And then once they have that clearly communicated, they can begin to develop. Or they may tell you, this may not be possible. And then you may have to redesign or maybe figure out something in the middle. But yeah, that pretty much concludes our workshop. Any questions?
There's one question that has been asked earlier.
Yeah.
That is, so they're asking any credibility issue with the plugin as they all seem open source, but how do we pick the reliable ones for professional projects?
Generally look at the reviews, but I think I believe they're all open source. So like you can try it out, and like I don't believe they're able to embed any virus within it. So there's no problem with that. But like looking at what is professional per se, whatever like works within your workflow. Some people don't necessarily need plugins. Plugins are nice that like they speed up some of your workflow, but it really depends on what your workflow is. And another thing you can do is just look at the reviews and see if that kind of aligns with what you want. In our case, like Danica and I both use a lot of icons, and this kind of speeds up our process instead of going online to download icons. So let's say it's material design icons. Once I download that plugin, if I right click and then go to plugins, I'll have access to all these icons. So instead of me having to either make it myself or look online and save it and then port it in, it's really accessible here. Another thing you can do is get, I believe Lorem Ipsum is also a good plugin just for filler text that you need. So if I create a text layer here and I generate 5 sentences, well, it's really big, but yeah, it's kind of the gist of it. There's a lot of plugins. I would just say explore and try them out kind of thing. But if you want something professional, I can't really pinpoint like what would be professional. It kind of like is what speeds up your workflow and makes your work look nice. That would be what I would identify as professional.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I saw another question. Can we go over how we made the small boxes equally distanced? If you select all 3 of your elements here, for example, you'll see on the top right of the design panel that there are these settings to either distribute horizontally or vertically if they're stacked vertically. But to create the equal spacing, you can click on that number that appears with the 2 lines, like the brackets and then the line in between, and you can change it to any value, so like 100. And then, yeah, move it around as needed.
Yeah, make sure you're selecting everything you want to do, though. Like, for example, if this was my range, what I mean by range is like my first item and my last item. And I look at this like in a horizontal layout. This will be like the max distribution of my range. And if I set distribute horizontally, it'll just move the one that's in the middle.
Can we have a sneak peek of what we expect to learn and see in the intermediate workshop? Yes, we're actually going to take these screens. So this entire wireframe screen, we're going to start building on the actual high fidelity with by adding images or gradients, text, and more styling. And then we're going to learn how to scroll through the album so you can actually see them go back and forth and through the entire app up and down. And we'll also link screens and teach you guys how to use components, which will help when you have a lot of the same element, like a single song on multiple lists.
It'll be pretty much the same theme, but yeah, a little bit more advanced, like Danica said.
And the workshop will be posted. I believe they have recordings, so I'm not sure when they're going to be posted, but yeah.
Yes, the videos will not be posted on time, unfortunately. They will be probably before workshop. No, sorry, before the Proton weekend. But Yes, it won't be posted today or tomorrow.
Oh, if you do go back on the slides, Daniel, we have the extra resources that we'll be giving to you guys so you can review with Figma's official tutorials, as well as some other resources that we've used personally.
We can export like our slide deck as a PDF. So when that happens, I think you still have access to the hyperlinks. So if you want to go to like the community icons, there'll be a link there. And like shortcuts, these are just a short list of them. There's a lot more you can find online, but essentially this will get you started.
All right, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up now, as we're slightly over time. Thank you guys all so much for joining us, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock with the next workshop.
And catch Danica and Daniel